After I gave birth, my mother-in-law took my daughter's hand and said, "Welcome to the family, baby. Let's hope you don't turn out like her." Then she turned to me. "Your job's done now. We'll handle the rest." When I refused to hand over my child, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Courts can be convinced you're not stable." I didn't cry. I just made a phone call that changed everything. Now she's begging to talk. The room was too quiet after the screaming stopped. I remember lying there, my body shaking from the pain and the pressure, the kind that leaves you hollow and full all at once.
I was holding my daughter against my chest.
She was wrapped in a warm hospital blanket, her tiny face tucked against me like she already knew I was the safest place she'd ever have. My heart was still racing, but I was calm in a way I hadn't felt in months. Years, maybe. Then I heard the door open. Patricia, my mother-in-law. Her heels clicked across the linoleum floor like she owned the place. She didn't even look at me. She went straight for my baby, and reached down, brushing her fingers over her tiny hand like she had some claim on her. "Welcome to the family, baby," she said, her voice all sugar. Then, with a quick glance at me, she added, "Let's hope you don't turn out like her." I froze. The nurse standing near the bassinet shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Patricia didn't care. She turned toward me like she was delivering some final command. "Your job's done now," she said. "We'll handle the rest."
Just like that.
Like I was nothing. Like I was just the incubator. I didn't say a word at first. My arms tightened around my daughter's small body. She was barely an hour old. I was still bleeding, still aching from the effort it took to bring her into the world. And this woman, this cold, controlling woman, was already trying to rip her away. "No," I said. Patricia tilted her head, like I was some confused child. She stepped closer, lowered her voice. "Courts can be convinced you're not stable. You want to test that?" There it was. The threat. She said it calmly, like she had rehearsed it, like she knew it would scare me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just looked at her. And something in me broke and rebuilt itself right there. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't about love or concern. This was control. She had been trying to take things from me for years. My confidence, my voice, my marriage, and now my daughter. She had underestimated me. I waited until she left the room, clearly satisfied that she had planted the seed of fear. Then I made a phone call. It was the first step in something I'd been quietly preparing for ever since I found out I was pregnant. I'd had 9 months to think, to plan. I never fully trusted her. There were signs. Comments she made to my husband about how I wasn't strong enough, wasn't mentally ready to be a mom. The way she'd always inserted herself into decisions, talked over me, acted like I was temporary. The call was to an old friend, a woman I hadn't spoken to in years, not since college. She was a family lawyer now. We weren't close anymore, but we'd once been through something dark together, and she never forgot. She told me to hold tight, to stay calm, that she'd take care of it. She told me what to document, what to request from the hospital, what steps to take so nothing Patricia said could stick. The next morning, the social worker visited my room. She asked questions. Kind, careful questions. She told me there was a process if I felt unsafe or pressured. I showed her the hospital's visitor camera footage. I had written everything Patricia said, word for word, immediately after she left. My friend told me that written documentation in the moment meant everything. 3 days later, I went home. But I didn't go back to the house I shared with my husband and Patricia. I stayed at a friend's place with my daughter. Quiet. Safe. Out of reach. Patricia called. She texted. She sent messages through my husband. Just a misunderstanding. She's hormonal. Let's talk. But I was already 3 steps ahead. Because I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for my child. I hired a private investigator. It wasn't cheap, but I sold a few things, some old jewelry, a laptop. Enough to get him working. And what he found confirmed everything I feared and more. Patricia had already consulted a lawyer about custody options. She had created a false paper trail, emails to herself, notes about my emotional state, even faked messages from my number, painting me as unstable. But what she didn't know, what she never thought to check, was that I had screenshots, voice messages, even witnesses who had seen her manipulate things before. Her mask was starting to crack. I gave all of it to my lawyer. My real one. Not someone connected to the family, not someone who could be bought. And still, I stayed quiet. I didn't argue. I didn't beg for my husband to take my side. I didn't try to explain myself. Because now I wasn't playing defense. I was building my case.
Carefully, patiently.
Just like she had done to me all those years. Now she's calling me every day.
But this isn't over yet.
Not even close. 3 weeks passed. I hadn't heard my husband's voice once. At first, I thought he might show up. That maybe some part of him would come to his senses and realize what Patricia was doing. But he didn't. No call. No message. Just silence. Like I'd been erased overnight. Then one evening I got a knock at the door. It was a process server. Custody papers. He was filing for full custody of our daughter. Attached was a sworn statement claiming I was suffering from postpartum depression, refusing help, isolating the child, and showing signs of mental instability. I read those words over and over, my hands shaking, stomach turning. And at the bottom, signed by him. Not Patricia. Him. That was the part that cracked something inside me, not that Patricia was behind it, but that he signed his name like it meant nothing. Like I was just an obstacle. Like our years together didn't matter. I couldn't breathe. I called my lawyer. She told me to stay calm. That they were building a case based on lies, but that didn't mean it couldn't hurt me if I reacted emotionally. I had to stay sharp. She filed a motion immediately to block any emergency custody ruling. But I knew this wasn't just about legal games. This was war. 2 days later, I got a visit from Child Protective Services. A caseworker showed up at the apartment, saying they'd received a report of emotional instability and concerns about the child's well-being. She looked around, asked to see the baby's sleeping space, my food supplies, our daily routine. I cooperated.
Come. Direct.
I told her everything. I showed her the doctor's note from my postnatal visit. I gave her the pediatrician's report. I let her talk to my friend, who had been helping me care for the baby day and night. By the time she left, she looked tired. She sat at the kitchen table before she went and told me something in a quiet voice. Off the record, she said, I see women like you a lot. Strong but cornered. They always make you look crazy first. But you're doing everything right. Don't give up. I didn't. But it got worse. A week later, Patricia went public. She started spreading stories online, Facebook, community forums, even anonymous posts on mom groups. She said I was an unfit mother, that I had abandoned my husband, that I was using postpartum hormones as an excuse to keep their grandchild away, that I had violent outbursts. Some people believed her. Some didn't. But it didn't matter. Because the damage was done. My name was now tangled in whispers and judgment. People from the neighborhood started reaching out, some kind, some cruel. Even people I thought were friends suddenly backed away, didn't respond to texts. But here's the thing. I had evidence. Recordings. Messages. Photos of bruises on my arms from months ago, back when Patricia had accidentally grabbed me too hard during an argument. Notes I'd kept, documenting every time she came into our room without knocking, every time she told me how unfit I'd be as a mother. Emails from her, criticizing how I dressed, how I cooked, how I failed to keep a man happy. I hadn't planned to use them. I never wanted this. But they pushed me. Now, my lawyer was preparing something bigger. A motion not just to block the custody claim, but to file for protective custody against both my husband and Patricia. That's when the next twist hit. I got a message from my husband's sister, Emma. We hadn't spoken in over a year. She'd always been quiet around Patricia, careful not to get involved. Her message was short. I have something you need to see. And I'm sorry I stayed quiet for so long. It included a video. From inside Patricia's house. A hidden camera Emma had placed months ago after Patricia tried to interfere with her own divorce. The footage showed Patricia sitting with a lawyer, one I recognized from the custody documents. They were discussing strategy. And then, clear as day, Patricia saying, "She's too emotional. All we need is one slip, one panic moment, and she's gone. The baby is ours." I couldn't breathe. I watched it again, and again, and then I sent it straight to my lawyer. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was premeditated. Patricia had planned to take my daughter before she was even born.
And now?
Now I had proof. But it still wasn't over. The court date was approaching. My daughter was 6 weeks old. I barely slept. I lived in a quiet panic, waiting for the next attack. The next lie. The next trap. They had money. They had power. But now I had something they didn't.
Truth.
And people were starting to see it. Even if it wasn't enough yet, I wasn't backing down. Not until they were finished. Not until I had her safe. Not until Patricia looked me in the eye again and knew she lost. The week before the hearing, I got a call I didn't expect. It was from my doctor's office. They said someone had called pretending to be me, asking for access to my medical records, trying to get details about my mental health. The receptionist said the voice didn't sound right, and that something about the questions felt off. They flagged it, refused to give anything out. I asked if they had the caller's number.
They did.
I gave it to my lawyer. It was a burner phone, one used in the same zip code as Patricia's home. She was trying to gather fake evidence. She wanted something, anything, she could twist in court. She was building a trap, and she didn't even care how deep she had to dig. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came 2 nights later. I heard a noise outside the apartment, soft at first. I looked through the peephole and saw no one. But in the morning, when I opened the door to grab the mail, there was a note tucked under the mat. No envelope. Just one piece of paper. "You're making this harder than it has to be. You think the court will side with someone like you? Don't forget what we know." No name.
No signature. Just those words.
I sat down right there on the floor, my baby in her carrier beside me, my hand trembling over the page. They were watching me. They wanted me scared, unstable, quiet. But they were wrong. I reported it. Gave the note to my lawyer, to the police, to the caseworker. Everyone took it seriously. I wasn't just some fragile new mom. I was a target of something deeper, planned, cruel, and dangerous. That same day, Emma messaged again. She said she wanted to meet. She had more. Documents, audio, things she had saved over the years but had been too scared to come forward with. We met at a diner. Neutral ground. She looked different, older, tired, like someone who had spent most of her life walking on eggshells. "I stayed quiet too long," she said, sliding a small USB across the table. "I thought if I kept my head down, she'd leave me alone. But you stood up. You made her angry. That means she's scared." On the drive home, I played the audio. One clip stood out. It was Patricia, months before I gave birth, speaking to her friend on the phone. "I already talked to Daniel. He knows what to say if things go bad. She just has to crack once. That's all it takes. If she so much as raises her voice, we file. Baby comes home with us. Simple." Daniel, my husband, he wasn't just going along with her. He was part of it. From the start. I pulled over and sat there for a long time listening to that sentence over and over. He was willing to lie in court. About me. About the mother of his child. Just to keep her in Patricia's grip. I thought back to the times I had cried in front of him, wondering why nothing I said seemed to reach him. He would just go quiet. Say I was too emotional and walk away.
Now I knew why.
He was waiting for the break. Waiting to use it. But I hadn't broken. Not yet. That night, I held my daughter close. Her breath soft against my chest, her fingers curling in her sleep. I looked at her and made a silent promise. They would not win. Not with threats. Not with lies. Not with tricks. Because I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready. And this time, I was coming for them. The morning of the court hearing, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I felt different. For months, they had tried to make me small, afraid, alone. But I had survived it all. I stood there in quiet clothes, no makeup, hair tied back. Nothing flashy. Just steady hands, clear eyes, and truth. My daughter was with a trusted friend, safe and far from the courthouse. My lawyer met me at the steps, a thick folder in her hands. "Are you ready?" she asked. I nodded. "Let's finish this." Inside, Patricia sat beside my husband. Her face calm, proud. He looked down most of the time, not once meeting my eyes. We started with the basics.
Name, birth.
The usual questions. Then came the claims. They told the court I had isolated the baby, that I had shown emotional breakdowns, that I had refused help, refused family support. They said I'd blocked access to the baby and was endangering her development. Patricia even brought a printed binder, pages and pages of emails, text messages, so-called evidence of my instability. Then it was my turn. My lawyer stood and handed the judge a file. Inside were the hospital records, the pediatrician's statements, photos of the nursery,
Text logs.
voice recordings, statements from my friend who had cared for me day and night, from the social worker, from the doctor's office, confirming the fake call. Then the audio. The judge listened. The room went silent when Patricia's voice filled the speakers. She just has to crack once, "Baby comes home with us." Simple. And then Daniel's voice, agreeing. The judge's face changed. Cold. Hard. I didn't look at Patricia or my husband. I kept my eyes forward.
I didn't need to see their panic.
I could feel it. Then my lawyer dropped the final piece. A notarized statement from Emma, and video footage from Patricia's home, showing her coaching Daniel, planning the false narrative, laughing about how easy it is to make a woman look crazy. It was over. The judge leaned forward, his voice steady. "This is one of the most disturbing and deliberate manipulations I've seen in a custody case. Not only was this mother targeted, but the child was nearly used as leverage in a campaign of control and emotional abuse." He ruled in my favor. Sole custody. Restraining orders against both Patricia and Daniel. But that wasn't all. Patricia was charged with filing false reports, impersonation, and obstruction. She was arrested before she left the building. She screamed at the officers, still trying to twist the story. No one listened. Daniel tried to speak to me once as they led her away. "Wait, I didn't mean." I looked at him. Just once. Then I turned and walked out. No words. No forgiveness. Just silence. 3 months passed. I changed my number. Moved to a new apartment. A small one, with sunlight that poured through the windows and soft rugs where my daughter learned to roll over. Emma and I stayed in touch. We weren't close, not yet, but we understood each other now. One day, I received a letter from Daniel. No return address.
He said he was sorry.
That he had been weak. That he didn't know how far it would go. He asked if he could see his daughter. I burned it, because I wasn't interested in apologies made only after the damage was done. He had his chance. He made his choice. Patricia lost everything. Her reputation, her position on the local board she'd held for years, her friends. Once the charges became public, people started talking. Turns out, I wasn't the only one she had tried to control. Just the only one who stood up. As for me, I didn't become fearless. I still had nightmares. Still looked over my shoulder sometimes. But I was no longer weak. I was no longer someone they could silence or twist. I was a mother, a protector, and I had faced the fire and walked out whole. My daughter will never know the full story.
Not yet.
But one day, when she's ready, I'll tell her. Not just about what they tried to do, but how I stopped them.